Today I would like to just give you a little idea of how we can move on to Google Classroom for assessment purposes. So last tutorial we touched on lesson delivery. Now we're looking at assessment. So we're going to use Google Forms initially to create the assessment, and then we're going to place it on our Google Classroom. So as you can see, my account is up, my Gmail account is open, and I'm going to the top right corner to click on Google Apps. And then I'm going to come down a bit and look for our Google Form icon. To the top, you will see that there are templates that we can use and just edit accordingly to suit our assessment needs. I love using templates than actually creating it from scratch, where you would use this blank form here. And all the forms that I created as assessment or some form of data collection basically piles up to the bottom here. Before we start, I'd like to just give you an idea of what your assessment could look like. So I have a quiz here that I used for my students at the end of a lesson, and I basically have the name to the top. I can describe the assessment here in form description, and basically I create my little elements, my components, my questions that make up the quiz itself. I included name, class, and email in all of my assessment. You don't have to do that, but I really think it's a good idea because one lovely feature of this tool is that you can actually download all of your students' responses into Excel. So I have 120 form ones for this particular assessment to complete, right? So it's very difficult for me to tally marks and enter marks into my mark book and so on if it is an actual exam assessment. Even if it's just for the end of a lesson, it's difficult to manage as well. So if I get the responses downloaded onto an Excel sheet, I would want to see who it is, the student, class they belong to. And of course, if I mark it, I would want to email response back to the student. So I would definitely want the email of the student collected as well. So I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. And we would actually create the elements to make up a test soon. But I just want to give you an idea of what it looks like. So I'm going to go back to the forms interface, the home interface, and we're going to start. So I'm going to do a quiz again. So I'm going to click on blank quiz here and give my quiz a name. Here I can describe my test a bit. And here I would start my questions. But like I mentioned earlier, I like to give the students an opportunity to put in their name. Now you'll notice as you type in name, this little interface changes a bit and it goes to short answer, which works well for me. So I can click here and choose the different forms of assessment we tend to use. So you'll see different options like short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, checkboxes, and many more. Alright, so I know short answer would work well for me at that point. It's just to collect their name, so I'm not going to assign any points to it. And I definitely don't want the students to skip this part of the form. So I'm going to toggle the icon here into required. So they must enter their form or before they move on to another component in the form. So they enter their name here. Then I go on the right and click on add question. So I'm going to put in class. Like I mentioned, I have students that belong to many classes, and just to get some meaningful ideas and thoughts in terms of whether my students understood the lesson or not could be quite difficult if they're all jumbled up. And when you download the Excel file that I showed you a little while ago, it will be a bit jumbled if they belong to different classes, but of course you can sort that file later on, which we'll look at later on as well. So again, there are no points associated with that question, which class you belong to, and it is a required question. I want them to fill it out, so I'm going to toggle the required button there. It's a multiple choice, so by default it went to multiple choice. Of course, you can change that option if you had a different kind of question. That's all the options I have there, so I'm moving on to another question. I would want their email. Why do I want their email? You may not need it, but I intend to send back the students' responses for them to actually see which ones they got right, which ones they got wrong. And of course, you want them to learn from the assessment experience. So collecting an email makes sense. All right, this again goes by default to short answer, no points associated, and it is a required field. I don't want them to leave it out. And then I start my test. What is which is not an input device? Okay, we're just practicing. So I'm gonna put mouse. Alright, so I'm just gonna put two options. It's just a demonstration. So which is not an input device? So that would be your printer. So you go to answer key and you select printer, and I intend to give 1 point. Of course, you can change the points you want here by selecting increase or decrease, and then I'm going to click on done. If it is that you are allowing students to not answer a question, you can leave required the way it is here, or if you want them to answer each multiple choice question or every kind of question, again you toggle it. So we will just do one open-ended and one closed. Describe the use of a computer system. I'm just putting some easy questions here. By default, it went to paragraph because I don't know really how long my students would want to allocate an answer. I go into points. I'm going to give 3. Alright, maybe I'm going to read it and then I'm going to decide how much marks I should get, which is our normal way for assessing open-ended. And I intend to actually manually mark that one. So what will happen when I send this form out, the multiple choice are automatically marked for me. I don't have to go through that, which is great, but I have to actually go through each student form and read the answer to the question. This should have been what? To come back and edit. Let's just change the question. Paragraph by default, as mentioned before, 3 points allocated, and then we're going to make it a required question. So I intend to go back and actually read the responses to this question. So if I add another one, let's see, what can we add this time? Answer is yes. I click on answer key. Yes. And I'm going to give 1 point. It's a required question. And basically you get the idea of what happens there. I just want to take a little time to go through some other parts of the form. I'm not ready to send just yet, so let's click on settings. So I do want to collect email addresses from my students because I intend to send them responses. I also don't want my students to send me more than one response, so I'm going to select limit to one response. You'd see that I moved past this particular option here. We do have a particular setup at our school in terms of how email addresses are sent out to students. So that's why I'm not going into this option here in terms of restriction of your email of your students and if to restrict access and so on. So I'll just leave that out because you may have different setups at your school. If you would like to allow your students to change their mind and edit their responses after submitting, you would select this option. If you would like to see the actual responses in terms of accuracy and statistics per question, you would click on See Summary Charts and Text Responses. I'm going to click this one. I'm then going to go into Presentation. If you want to see the progress of your students' responses, you would select Show Progress Bar. If you would like your students to see the questions in a random order, you would shuffle. But I tend to like to put multiple choice to the top and then the open-ended to the bottom. I did not do that in this demo. I mixed it up. Sometimes if you shuffle the questions and students are sitting close together in an exam setting, you may want this option on. Shuffle questions order in case they're able to, look across and see each other's monitor and see their responses as well. Quizzes is next. If you intend for this assessment to be a quiz, again you toggle this on. If you want grades to be tallied, so if you have 10 multiple choice and it's 1 point per question, then what's going to happen is that you get a tally in the end out of 10. So if they got 6 correct, you'll get 6 out of 10, and that will actually come out on the Excel sheet that I showed you earlier. There are features to prevent students from opening other applications. Of course, this feature, you would have to go into it a bit more, and depending on the kind of account that you have, there's a regular Gmail account, and so on. You would have to learn a little bit more on the security measures that are placed along with this particular tool to learn more about that, so we're not going to go into Chromebooks right now. I do intend to give my students marks back, like the actual tally, but I know that I have to go through each student's form and see their responses and mark their open-ended responses. So I do not want them to get it immediately after each submission. If it was multiple choice alone, then great. They would automatically get back their marked assessment in their email account, especially since we included their email address. And I would leave this feature on, but I don't want that because I have to go now and read their responses for the open-ended questions, allocate a mark for each student, and then after I complete that for all my students, then I can later release the mark to them, which means, of course, I would have needed that email, which is why I spoke about the email address being important. If you want your students during the exam to be able to see questions they missed, or the ones they got correct and so on, or wrong, you would toggle these features on as well. So then you want to click on Save. So now you're ready to send your form to your students. So you can email them, which you don't really want to choose as a preferred option. You would prefer to most likely go on to the link icon And you can copy this link as is, or you can choose the shortened URL, just a shorter version. Copy here, or you can just click on copy here. And what you want to do is go to your Google Classroom, the one that we created last tutorial. So we go back to our Google app icon, going to our Google Classroom, and go to the class we created, and let's put our post. So you may give them some instructions. And whatever else you may want to say to your students. And you can copy and paste the link in this post, but it would be a better option to, let's say, go to add link and right click and paste it as a link. So you click on add link and your students see it as an attached link. Then you post. So when they go to their classroom, they see your announcement here, they see whatever instructions you gave them, and they click onto the assessment you created and they see your exam, they complete the exam or your quiz or your worksheet, whatever kind of assessment you want to give, and they will click on submit. Going back to the blank quiz, I made a little mistake earlier. All right, they should have remained. Describe the use. All right. So you can edit. And there's no need to save or anything like that. It is automatically saved. You'll see all changes are saved to the drive. So you can make those changes here. You can come here and give your form a special name, because as you saw earlier, when you click here back on the form home icon, you see all the created tests that you would have had created over time. So again, your template to the top, your different assessment to the bottom. I'm just going to click on a different assessment that I had with my students. I'm going back to the one I did earlier, just to show you. When you go to responses, you can see the statistics generally of your students' performance, how much points they scored in general. You can see all of your students, their email names, their scores out of 7 in the case of my assessment, when they did it, and so on. And you just click on release scores, this button here. I'm not going to click on it because I'm not ready to give it back to them. All right. And if it was a multiple choice like this was, they would actually get the assessment back with the correct answers. If it was wrong, they would get their tally. And you can even type in comments as you mark them. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. If you go into individual, for example, you see the student's name, her class, her email. You see the question, and she got it correct, okay, and she got the 1 point. If for some reason it was incorrect, you can actually type in some sort of response that you wanted her to see as feedback and save it. I'm not going to save it because I don't want her to see that. And when she gets back the actual assessment marked, she see those personal comments that you made. Now it takes time to do that, but in a time like this where you really want to communicate with students and they're at home, it would be important to give them that personal feedback. So that's it for assessment online using Google Classroom. Just to sum up, you use Google Forms to create your assessment. So you go to Forms, you choose your template, create your forms, I'm going to blank again. And whenever you're done, you go into settings, make sure you go through general, presentation and quizzes, make sure you're happy, and then you click on send. Again, you can type out the emails if it's just some assessment, or it will be better if you share it using the link. And in the same way, you can copy this link and paste it onto a Gmail message, an actual email message to a student or students. You can use the link in the same way. That's it. Hope you enjoy the tutorial. Take care. Bye.